When we look at strategies for supporting self-esteem, what we're really wanting to be focusing on is being able to put the brain into its best space possible so that when you go into situations as a dyslexic, you are better prepared and able to manage what is in the situation happening. This is where we're wanting to make sure the brain stays in its prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain. As the dyslexic's knowledge around their own dyslexia and how their strategies work and their coping strategies work, as their knowledge increases, their ability to rationally understand what is happening means they start to move more towards being able to keep their brain engaged and online. This, therefore, increases their chance of being able to make change in how they cope. The more dyslexics can have these support processes in place in good times, like practicing them, when the dyslexic goes through periods of stress, which are those transition stages, these strategies are more likely to be able to be used by the dyslexic. Here are some ideas for developing strategies to support a dyslexic's self-esteem. So the first one is noticing strengths. The second one we look at is mindset. And the third one is focusing on detail and why that's important. The first strategy we look at is noticing strengths. These are dyslexic-specific strengths, strengths that come with the way a dyslexic thinks and processes information. This noticing of the strengths gives a better balance to what it means to be dyslexic. So the challenges that dyslexics face that have come with them through the schooling system aren't always going to be the main focus in their thinking. So we want to look at the process for noticing strengths. What gets in the way of noticing the strengths? What makes it hard to see them? And then what is the process for noticing them, but then trying to integrate the strengths into the dyslexic's way of thinking? So what gets in the way of noticing dyslexic strengths is the masking. So masking is the dyslexic's automatic coping strategy that covers up their struggles because they don't want anyone to know that they are struggling. But the thing with masking is it can also mask their strengths as well. So we want to keep the challenges on the down low, but it means we keep the strengths on the down low as well. The other aspect is that for dyslexics, because their dyslexic strengths are a natural part of how they think and approach life, they assume everyone can do what they do, and they don't realize that they are specific to the way they think and process information. So how do we go about noticing the strengths? It has to be a really mindful and thought out process because we're going against a coping strategy of masking that the dyslexic has used all through their life so far. So the first part is actually understanding the dyslexic strengths and increasing the awareness and knowledge of what they are. Thinking about them, this process helps to put dyslexics into their prefrontal cortex of their brain, that thinking part of the brain, so that they start to engage with them and think about them on a rational level rather than an emotional level. Next, we need the dyslexics to notice when they are using them. So we've already covered what dyslexic strengths are. You've increased your awareness of them. Now dyslexics are going to start noticing when they use them, whether it's in the workplace, at home, in social situations. Once dyslexics are noticing their strengths, they need to consciously say them or write them to cement that knowledge. It's that talking about it, that external verbalization helps to cement it a lot more so that dyslexics can't bypass it as saying, oh, it's just everyone can do it. This whole process of understanding them, noticing them, and saying them or writing them will take time. And the dyslexic may only notice a couple to start with, but that's the start. What's happening here is the dyslexic is making new pathways in the brain, so that takes time and conscious thought. Another aspect of looking at the self-esteem of dyslexics is having a growth mindset. Growth mindset means you know your brain can change and learn, as opposed to fixed mindset, which is where you think your brain is fixed and it can't change from the way it is. What facilitates growth mindset is using the word yet and understanding what it means. The word yet recognizes that learning takes time and effort, and you will likely make mistakes as you learn. You might say, oh, I can't do this work task yet. Think back to when you learned a task like learning to drive or ride a bike. It took time and effort to do it, but as you practice, it became easier and easier. This process is when you're laying down new pathways in the brain as you learn a new way of doing something. So it's just understanding that it takes time and effort. We're creating a new pathway in the brain, but it can be done. Another process for developing growth mindset is using the two following questions. What did you do well? It helps you reflect on what you did do well and puts you in a positive frame of mind. And what will you do differently next time? Which says that I recognize I might have done something quite the way I wanted it, but I'm going to learn from that, and this is how I'm going to change it next time. And that's growth mindset. Another thing that can help self-esteem for dyslexics is focusing on the detail. Quite often, dyslexics make sweeping statements such as, I'm no good at reading, I'm no good at writing, or I'm really good with people, or I'm really creative. However, if you can pause and break down those sweeping statements, you get to know specifically what is difficult or what is a strength, so it doesn't feel overwhelming, and then you can use that knowledge to say what your strengths are. What happens when you do this is you may notice themes that come out like with your strengths. This could be that, I'm really good at talking with people, but it could be that you're really good in one-on-one situations for helping people feel safe to tell you what they need. Having this information in detail helps dyslexics to advocate better for themselves because they can specifically say what they're good at. On the next screen is an example of an activity that helps to break down those sweeping statements and helps to focus on the dyslexic strengths. So the idea here is to list what you do well and what you struggle with, but in detail. I'm no good at reading, but it could be that you're no good at reading textbooks as opposed to magazines. So it's the aim too is to have more in the I'm good at column than what I struggle with. You can ask other people what they would add to your list and take your time with it and come back to it over a period of time. It doesn't have to be all done at once, and it helps just for you to increase your awareness of what's happening for you in your brain.